I felt like I was born to do startups. How do you take a business, a high growth business, and really accelerate it and turn around a shrinking business with a limited budget and a limited time? The right people have a compounding effect, not just an incremental effect. If I were, an individual contributor in sales, I would use AI and ChatGPT as an example to do that day one. The technology matters less than does it solve for those three top priorities, and does it fit within our ethical framework. AI is transforming the way we do business. There's absolutely no question in my mind. 5 years from now, businesses will be run differently. There will be winners and losers. There will be jobs that are destroyed, and there will be jobs that are created.
Thanks for coming on, Paul. We've done some stuff together, right? And if I was going to say one thing that I always know, every time we speak, I know there's going to be big vision, tough challenge, and that's what characterizes you for me. Well, the first time we met one another, it was, billion-dollar opportunities. Here's the challenge. How are we going to get through?
Yep.
But you've always brought that vision. And but yeah, tell everyone a little bit about your background, Paul, and then would you say was sort of I always ask at the start of this, what were those defining moments in your career, good and bad, maybe that have kind of helped you learn and get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think, I have a bit of a different background in, born and raised in Silicon Valley with a entrepreneurial father who founded a company that went on to be a Fortune 500. So I felt like I was born to do startups. So I graduated from University of Colorado, and 4 days later, I drove from Colorado out to Silicon Valley and started a job as an SDR. So cold calling. And these were in the days when you still went to paper. So like we had a phone book that you would go through and you'd call people. But I was always taught that being technical is important too. So I had learned to deploy the software of the startup that I went to work with as an SDR. An opportunity came up. I went into being a sales engineer, and then the guy was a sales engineer, went to lead a sales team and brought me with him. So that was how I started my sales career. Later in my career, though, I wanted to try things that were bigger. And obviously, you and I crossed paths at Adobe, where I went in, Adobe, at NetApp, where when I went into it, I was supposed to do emerging technology stuff with the cloud group. And as I entered the organization, instead of having an $8 million sales organization that was supposed to grow rapidly, I had that $8 million sales organization and $130 million sales organization that was shrinking. So, how do you take a business, a high growth business, and really accelerate it and turn around a shrinking business with a limited budget and a limited time was that challenge, which I really enjoyed. It was a lot of fun to get to see both sides of the coin and how to go about doing that. From there, I went into venture capital and then decided that venture capital is not the speed at which I like to work. I like to work fast and move quickly. And venture capital, while an amazing way to make money and a great career, your time horizons are 7, 10, 12 years versus 7, 10, or 12 months, which I like. So then I went back into operating roles, both as a CRO and then now at Cinchy as a CEO.
Yeah, wow. What a background, Paul. And as you say, you went straight into SDR, literally cold calling.
Yep.
From we would call that the yellow pages, the giant phone book of businesses. That's how you learn. And then you went into startup world, and that's a different level of pressure, isn't it? And then into taking that mentality into more short-term gold kind of corporate CRO type roles, 12 months turnaround is fast, though, isn't it? That surprised me about venture capitalists, because I always thought about the venture capitalist world as, yeah, that's really fast and we get everything done. But actually, that time horizon's a lot longer than you're given if you join a corporation, right?
Correct. They have a very long view of the world. They don't, they want 5 to 10x returns, and they're willing to wait 7 to 10 years to get that. That being said, if they don't think you're the right person, they're happy to turn you over fairly quickly, because they know that the right people have a compounding effect, not just an incremental effect. So they're really looking to make sure they have the best of the best and double down on the investments that they make that are really skyrocketing. But most VCs are aware that people make the business. And that's where, as a leader in an organization, if you're not making compounding effective results, they want to bring in somebody who will, because getting their money back is not their goal. 10x is their goal.
10x, yeah. So super high pressure roles, and success. You've had a lot of success, and you've stayed at the top of that game for a long time. What's been the driver, Paul? Because how you take that challenge, and yet every time we meet and all the interactions I've had and seen you in front of your teams, you're the calm person in the room. You've got the vision, but you also are able to maintain this level of calmness and clarity that was I found pretty inspirational and unusual in the kind of corporate world where I met you.
Yeah, I think confidence is key, and confidence is not arrogance, and it's not cockiness. It's knowing that you're bringing value to the table. And as you engage with both customers and your peers in an organization, knowing that they are your peers, even if they're higher level than you in the organization, even if they have different roles and functions, ideally they know more than you in a lot of areas. But really having that confidence to first be vulnerable. So ask questions when you don't know what's going on. To when you do have a strong opinion, be prepared to defend that opinion, because other people will have different opinions. And it doesn't mean defend it to the death, because there's going to be times where even if you're right, you got to give, because you can't fight every battle on every front.
Yeah,
But really just having that confidence that you go, hey, the best I'm going to do is the best they're going to get. And so I'm going to calmly do the best I can do, and do it with a sense of urgency to keep moving things forward. And then knowing that that's going to have some kind of payout at the end, even if it's not hitting the exact objective, even if it's not, you're giving the best you can give, and therefore you should have confidence in what you're giving.
yeah, and confidence. If we sort of start pivoting towards AI, with the audience that's watching this is people who are in probably in B2B sales, or
Yep.
specialists or consultants who are engaging with customers. What's been, I guess, I was thinking about how do we structure this conversation. I think probably get your perspective on the pivot that you've had to make into AI.
Yep.
What new conversations, new challenges, new problems to solve. Advice you'd give to B2B sales making that transition right now, which so
Yep.
many are. And I'd say confidence level is low. And that's not a criticism; it just is a fact. Confidence level
Yep.
is low right now, because people feel a little overwhelmed. And then I'd like to go into the problem statements that your company helps solve, and what are those business outcomes you're enabling for your customers with your solutions. I think that would be really, because when we were talking before, and I've been checking out your company, you seem to solve for one of the biggest problems out there, which is all around data and data management. So, but yeah, look, been your experience, Paul, of AI suddenly coming along, just kaboom, here it is, and then how you found that transition into those new customer conversations.
Absolutely. So I love AI. First of all, I think it's I've very much enjoyed and am excited about the possibilities. I do think that there's risks too, but that's for another day. But I think, everything from being able to ask ChatGPT to plan a trip for you to really refining and or creating ideas and start points for, you know, conversations, for emails, etc. So over my career, I've learned I'm a better editor than an author. And so I love to go to, and I'll typically try multiple AI prompts so that I get some flexibility around it. But when I start a LinkedIn post or even an email to somebody, I'll ask ChatGPT to write an outline for me. And the reason being is then I can edit it and use the framework that I think is best personifying what I want to accomplish, but it gives me a starting point. And I think, salespeople a lot of the time really struggle with that blank sheet of paper. Like, where do I get started? And if you have something to prompt you, for me anyway, it builds confidence in me because I may go, hey, I think this piece is bullshit. I don't want it in there. I may go, ooh, there's an idea I didn't really think of. But it really, having that starting point allows you to edit, not author, which again, for me, builds that confidence and a bit of that swagger in that, okay, I can fill out the context and I can fill out a lot of the extra in there, but it gives me a starting point. And I think if I were, an individual contributor in sales, I would use AI and ChatGPT as an example to do that day one. But I think that there's a challenge there as well that I think I find, SDRs today don't handle it well, and even some AEs don't handle it well, which is these large language models are generic. And conceptually, Ben, if you wrote the same prompt that I did and asked a question, we'd get the exact same answer. And reality is that what a salesperson brings to the table is knowledge of the account, knowledge of the human beings they're interacting with, and so much context into what's going on in the deal that having AI start an email, but you got to personalize it and you got to make it an emotional hook. And I don't think this is totally new. Like, I worked with a guy who I really enjoyed working with early in his career, salesperson, and he's like, I don't get responses to my emails. And I said, okay. He would forward me a bunch of them so that I could help him get to the next level on that front. And the thing that he didn't do is he didn't give any context of himself as a human being, and he didn't ask for any context of the human on the other side to make it a relationship versus a business transaction. I think AI is going to be great at the business transaction, but this old adage of people buy from people is still there. And if you rely on AI to be your primary driver of your communications with customers, it's not going to have that personal touch and those vulnerability hooks that really get somebody wanting to do business with you, especially in startup land where you don't have a brand, you don't have context. But I do think that applies everything all the way up to the, Cisco's, HPE's, Siemens, where I worked in venture capital of the world. They have big name brands, but people still buy from people.
Yeah, they do, and that's the great news for everyone in sales that's
for sure.
listening to this, right? And so Satya Nadella says thinking with AI, and that's, as you're talking, that's what you're now doing. You think, right? Let me get my starting point. I love what you just said about I'm a much better editor than author. aren't we all? You know, we're all overwhelmed. We've got just
Yep.
urgent to-do lists the whole time, and pressures. And so you're talking about just give me that starting point. But your advice for sales is don't get lazy. Don't
Right.
think this thing is going to do. And you get a whole bunch. I was going to ask you about this later in the podcast, actually, but I'm going to ask you now. You must get so many reach outs trying to prospect with you. And I don't know about you, but the ones that are being generated by AI, you can also tell.
Yep.
So if you don't get involved in that as the salesperson and as you say, personalize, um, but then you're going to have a problem because you're not doing that little bit of trust build on the people buy from people side. Um, Tell me, which prospecting reach outs do you respond to, even if it's a thanks but no thanks, but you sort of feel a little compelled to respond to? What is that? What's the characteristics of that type of reach out?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I try to reach out to the best and the worst. And the worst I give feedback because I remember being a young salesperson going, trying these things. And those worst, maybe they get my company name wrong. Those I try to go like, hey, if you do this, you lose instant credibility and I'd never work with you. But I think that the ones that I find that I will say thanks, but no thanks, or yes, are ones that, first of all, make it personal. So there's some kind of tie into my life. And I'm not super shy. I publish on LinkedIn. People can find out things about me on the internet. So having a personal hook, being specific in the value proposition, generic value proposition, like I'll never respond to because I don't have time to go research what they can do for
Mm.
me. And then why they're different. So some unique differentiation. So I get probably 30 reach outs a day. A huge number of them are, staff augmentation for engineering and or outsourcing SDRs, but it's the same message every time. So you couldn't ask to remember any of them. I want to know what makes you unique, why you're going to impact my business, and why I should give you 15 minutes of my time. I do
Yeah.
ask, I would encourage any individual salesperson to ask for 15 minutes, not 30 minutes, because 15 minutes seems doable.
Mm.
And if you get my attention in 15 minutes, I'll give you 30. But the reality is asking for 30 or an hour is even worse. Like I would never give anybody an hour on a cold call. And so, it's that combination of making it personal, being specific, and then telling me what you can actually do for my business is what gets me to respond.
Yeah. Do you rely upon, even on those really good emails, reach outs where you take a look at it and you're like, actually, that's quite compelling. And I think you're right about value proposition, but make it snappy. Let's
Yep.
not have 10 bullet points for me to read through here. Um, do you find yourself reliant upon the seller following up with you?
It's a good question. If their value proposition catches my eye, I will typically respond fairly quickly. But if I don't get an engaged response back, so if I go, hey, yeah, I'm open to 15 minutes of time, here's my assistant, I'm not going to go chase them. I need, again, it goes back to don't be lazy as a salesperson. If somebody says yes,
Take
engage
it.
that. You can qualify me. There's legitimacy in qualify. But I do think that it requires you to engage. And if a week goes by and there's no response and it doesn't happen quickly, I'll forget why I'm meeting with the person. And then business comes in and gets in the way again. So I do think that, prompt follow up is important. Typically, though, I'll see, when I see people on their third reach out of something that's very generic, then I get irritated and I block them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And there was an interesting, I think it was SaaStr or one of the SaaS company blogs that I saw that had an interesting point on AI reach out. And this goes back to make sure you're doing your work, is that executives are more inclined to block what they believe is an AI generated message versus a human.
Yeah.
So you may lose that email address forever if you're relying on everything to be AI generated, because people go, I don't mind blocking a computer, even if it's a bad message. And I feel this way myself. It's rare that I block a human being. It's because, hey, they're doing their jobs. They may not be doing it well, but I don't want to block them from doing their jobs. An AI bot, I don't care.
Yeah, it's getting blocked.
Right.
It's getting blocked for sure. No, that's really good advice. So anybody who's going to be reaching out to Paul after listening to this, then he's told you what you need to do, and
Exactly.
very very sensible, good advice. Thank you for that, Paul. So going into AI adoption by enterprise, um, uh, what are you seeing? Maybe let's start with, what does your company provide? If no one's ever heard of Cinchy, what are you guys doing, and how are you supporting the execution of customers who are looking to implement AI within their enterprise? And
Yeah,
then
so
what do you
Cinchy is
what
a
are you seeing?
collaborative data platform. So think of it from the standpoint of most large enterprises have data scattered all over their organization in SaaS applications, in data warehouses, and they don't have a mechanism for pulling it all into a centralized location and keeping it in sync across all the systems that need access to it. And as you think about AI, the biggest challenge that I feel like enterprise organizations are running into is same as the what I said on the sales front, is giving the AI engine enough context and data to actually be relevant versus generic in specific situations. And so Cinchy's got a lot of experience with large banks. We're a Canadian company by birth. So the TDs of the world, the RBCs, use Cinchy. And as we hosted an event for CIOs and chief data officers in Toronto about 3 months ago, we asked what's getting funded, what's not getting funded, where are the challenges? And all of the folks at the dinner that we had said AI is getting funded all over the place, but it doesn't have the foundational data that they need in order to make it successful. So data initiatives are getting defunded at times, even though without a solid foundation, your AI initiatives are going to fail. And unfortunately, I think that your data is never going to be 100%. So people like to think in black and white, where it's like, oh, I've got the greatest data foundation. Well, data changes and moves and evolves all the time. So you need a platform that can do that with them. And AI is going to need that data evolving and maturing over time as well. And so it's a bit of a chicken and an egg, but I think you got to do both. So you've got to start proving the value of AI in enterprise organizations, but improving your data foundations and feeding the AI more and more so it'll get smarter along the way.
So that data foundation. So what does a typical AI kind of initiative look like for one of your bigger customers? Do they set up a center of excellence and then they try and clean all of this data and bring it all into one place? What's the mechanics of it? And then you said that then they're reporting, yeah, it fails because of the data challenge. What's the mechanics of that? Are they failing in pilot? Are they failing in some sort of deployment? I know you wouldn't want to name specific customers' names, but
Yeah.
what's your view? What are you seeing?
Well, so I'll start on the AI front. I think that people are piloting it all over the place. And some in dumb places, frankly, and some in incredibly intelligent places. I don't think that those AI failures are high profile yet because people are piloting, but you will see that there's folks. I think it was Pfizer or one of the big pharmaceutical companies adopted Copilot from Microsoft, and they unplugged it because it was too expensive for the value that they were getting out of it. And so that doesn't surprise me because it's genericized for everybody versus being fed the information and the context necessary to make decisions specific to a Pfizer. Um, but on the data front, what that really means is historically, when people want applications talking to each other, they do point to point integrations. So Salesforce talks to Zendesk, as an example. And that works very well when you're doing one system to one system. Unfortunately, as SaaS has exploded over the years, people have hundreds of these systems, and you can't build lines between every single system along the way. And so that's where, what happens in a Cinchy world is we connect to each of those systems and build a central hub, and people can edit and audit and protect the data down to the individual cell level, and that can then feed AI models. And where we see our strongest use cases, which is interesting from this podcast standpoint, is around customer 360. And as we talk to customers, either they're data rich and information poor, or they're data poor and information poor. So what I mean by data rich and information poor, I actually think that, Ben, when you were working with us at NetApp, we were data rich, information poor. You could find out a bunch of stuff, a bunch of data, what they bought, when they bought, how many they bought, or are they using the platform, just data. But the reality is 1,000 data points becomes useless because you can't find the gold nuggets in that. And so one of the areas that we've worked with customers in their customer 360 scenario is, how do you take the data in your organization, feed it to an AI engine to pull out those gold nuggets, so while you still have all that data available, you're getting real information out. And that can be, so imagine, you have 15 phone calls with a customer and they're all tracked with Gong, as an example. What are the wins and losses you've had in those phone calls? What are the areas that a customer is waiting for? Gong does some of that very well, specifically in a call. They're getting better at doing it across the Gong enterprise. But okay, well, what if you have Zendesk support tickets open? Or in our world, in our own environment, we found we were looking at our customer success and renewal scenarios, and we integrated into our accounts receivable data. And we had one customer that was fantastic and loved us all the way up to the CEO, but they hadn't paid us in 18 months. And so your chance of renewal on that is fairly low. And now we reached out to the customer and worked out a payment plan, but the customer was having financial issues and has since announced that they're going out of business. So there's elements in data that's scattered across the organization that, if it can be summarized and given to a sales rep, a customer success rep, an executive sponsor, you can take action and materially move your business. But you can't rely on one data source because Gong doesn't have all the information. Neither does Salesforce, even though everybody will say it's my system of golden records. The reality is that data is scattered across the enterprise. And the reason people don't bring it all into a central repository is because then it's thousands of data points and no information. So you need both in order to be successful, in my mind.
Yeah, that's a really good information, data rich, information poor, and vice versa. I think that really would resonate for lots and lots of enterprises listening to this, right? And then actually getting what's an actionable insight out of that data. And it's really interesting what you said about lots and lots of different systems and SaaS products. And I think Klarna, which we've talked about a bit on the
Yep.
show, 12. I think Sebastian, who's their CEO, said. I think he said they had about 1,200 SaaS products running, and how do we what do we do with all of the data, and how do we actually make that actionable? But that is the scale of I guess you then end up with these different silos of data. But
Yes.
on that, do you have, so your customers, when you go and meet with them and they say, right, Paul, let's tell you about our situation with all of our SaaS and where our data is. Presumably they've got mixtures of cloud, of on-prem, of different types of data. How do you guys handle the complexity of that, the technical complexities around that?
Yeah, I mean that's what we're built to do. So that helps. So our founders came out of large banking institutions, so TD Bank and RBC in Canada, and they architected the system specifically to be able to hook into data sources, everything from the most modern AWS and Azure offerings, all the way to we won a deal with the largest manufacturer of chocolate in Europe, because they had an ERP system running on an AS400. And for the younger people on this call, that's a mainframe.
I know.
Um,
I started out at a computer center. They ran everything on AS400.
yeah, it's funny
Green
that
green screen, right?
yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of folks that don't know what those are anymore because they've retired mostly.
Good.
Uh,
Yeah, good. Yeah.
so that's our expertise, is getting data from whatever sources. And it's interesting now, the world is changing as well in with the geopolitical conflicts going on, if you will. The desire to have data locally and in sovereign locations is important. So we're a little bit different than technologies that are out there in that our software can run on premise, it can run in the cloud, on a private cloud, or it can run in our SaaS environment. And we're actually seeing that as a competitive advantage. Though, Ben, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would have ever been involved with an on-prem software company again, I would have said there's no reason to do it. We're seeing more and more that there is reason to do it.
Right. And what's the specific drivers around the reason to do it on prem rather in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, they're both, there's in the last 90 days, there's been backlash against the U.S. in regards to foreign policy, et cetera. And so people want to keep their data independent of a individual geography. There's been more rumor than proof, but that the Chinese government looks into data that's accessible in the People's Republic of China. And so I think people are going, wait, there's been a lot of talk about data is the new oil, and there's truth to that. And not wanting governments or dependencies on organizations that could get access to that data in a dangerous way. And so people want to know that their data infrastructure is safe and secure, just like you want to know oil pipelines are safe and secure. And sometimes that means keeping controls tight. And our argument is a couple of fold. Part of a collaborative data platform is you don't need necessarily a centralized team to keep data safe and secure. You want to allow the owners of those individual data products to decide what should be accessible to who. But in a question of sovereignty and really having that control, we want to put the power in our customers' hands to make sure that it's where they feel comfortable and know that they can, rely on their data regardless of, is it DNB Bank, the largest bank in Norway? Is it, a bank in France? Is it a storage provider in Santa Clara, California? They're going to want to know that their data is where it's safe and secure.
Yes, yeah. It's absolutely critical, isn't it? And that's so as a risk goes for a corporation, that's probably one of the biggest ones, right? Just to unpack a little bit the when their projects just fail or come a bit unstuck. And you mentioned, people pulling back on Copilot, and it's finding out all this data, and there's no real controls around it.
Yep.
It's not really the tech. My view is it's never really been the technology. I've been involved in lots of ERP implementations over the years. If technology was great, it was actually implementing that technology within changing business process, changing people, the way people are working. Now, enterprise are meant to be saying, well, now we're going to get AI giving us advice on and real time. It's going to change stuff on the ground for us.
Yep.
What does the team need to look like on the customer side to make sure you've got what advice would you give to say, right, this is going to require an extraordinary group of human beings with different skill sets, probably from different parts of the business, to make this work? What does the dream team look like for an enterprise customer, Paul, to actually do this very difficult thing?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's going to evolve over time, and people are going to learn over time. For me, if I was building my dream team, I'd want a prompt engineer, so somebody who knows how to ask the right questions in the right manners to do that. I'd want a data governance team, so really understanding, how we bring data in. I'd want a forensic accountant, believe it or not, because I'd want to
Right.
be able to get back to the source data at any given time, because I want to know, where the AI drift is happening, because AI drift does happen where the models learn from bad data and then they move in that direction and believe it's gospel, if you will. And then business analysts that, have a broad mindset of what are we trying to accomplish, so that they can review results, make sure that, we're getting there. And if you're not getting the results that you expect, leveraging the forensic accountant and the data governance team to go, okay, what was the information or the data that fed this model, so we can identify, is it a model issue or a data issue? And I think, lots of people lose the provenance of the data. And if you can't get back to where it was created and why it was created, there's risk of losing okay, was it a data error? Was it a model error? Was it a human error? Because human errors will still be common in AI. So for me, it's really being able to get back to the root if you need to. And I don't think you need a huge forensic accounting team, because I think it's going to happen rarely, but having the infrastructure to be able to get back to the root is going to be key in my mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and they're very different roles to what we've been used to previously, which is a challenge for enterprise, right? And people
Right.
are going to be expected to wear new hats and to learn. And then I guess one of the other aspects of this is that within a large enterprise organization, you're going to have multiple AI projects simultaneously in parallel being developed. What's the kind of CEO's role in this, and someone near the top having that oversight and depth of understanding? How important do you think that executive sponsorship is, Paul?
I think it's critical, but I think that it would be different than the way you'd expect. I think, my view of a CEO's role is to really set culture and prioritization. And I think that's just as relevant in an AI world as it was in a SaaS world. So my goal and my focus is really in going, okay, here are the top 3 priorities of the business. and here's our culture and values that we live by. And
Mm.
AI should fit those paradigms, or we shouldn't invest. But that is the same as 10 years ago or 15 years ago in SaaS, right? Where you're like, okay, what are our primary goals and what are we trying to accomplish? AI is just software, and it's more sophisticated software, but it's really around investing in your top priorities as a business and making sure they align with your culture and values to do that. I mean, as you know, Ben, there are people who have different ethics in the world, and some that'll push the boundaries, and some people get very valuable results out of that. Like if you look at the Ubers of the world, they've changed transportation in cities. They broke rules to do that. That's not my mindset or mentality. I don't do that, but I think you need to implement this technology with those cultural values and ethics in play, and that's a CEO's job to set those trends. And then I would look at my functional leaders to bring me solutions that help me advance the business, whether they're
Mm.
AI, whether they're robotics, whether they're, it doesn't really matter, drones.
Yeah.
The technology matters less than does it solve for those three top priorities, and does it fit within our ethical framework. For me, that's really what I would look for as I look at AI. And then I think that your responsibility is to question the safety and stability of the framework and the data underneath. But I think that ties back to, again, just like any other project, you want to ask questions to ensure that it's got a high likelihood of success.
Yeah, yeah. So it's as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, chief executive's role is setting the standards. These are the standards that we're going to adhere to as we go through these things. And you mentioned each different functional leader, and I guess that's the thing. Every line of business is looking how could we benefit through this technology. And then you also mentioned then the physical, Jensen calls it the physical AI is now coming. We're going to have the autonomous vehicles
Yep.
and the robots. And all of a sudden, every large business is going to adopt the physical manifestations of AI. And just, I'm keeping an eye on time as well. Conscious it's the weekend. But where are you? I was watching Jensen at GTC last week, and it's just unbelievable
It
what's
is.
still to come. He said we are, I think he said the number is we're $150 billion of sales of Hopper and now Blackwell of, I think he said 4 trillion. So we're at the very start, and then next comes the physical AI. What's your perspective on what's to come, and what are the sort of time frames that you and your exec team are kind of thinking about these new developments that your customers are going to be looking to harness?
Yeah. So I am a little bit like, I am skeptical it's moving as fast as people have said in the past. So Elon Musk said we'd all be driving autonomous cars by now. Frankly, I'd love to have an autonomous car, but we're just not there yet. Um, I think in 10 years, though, that 10 years is a horizon that seems like a long time. It'll go by faster. Anybody who has kids knows that it flies by faster than you think it will. But I think you're going to have a huge physical presence of AI in 10 years. I think that the evolution of software and how business is done will be more a 5-year time horizon.
Yeah.
Just because I think on the physical side, you're going to have the hardware keep up with the software right now, and software is moving much faster. But I think that our world will look a lot different in 10 years. For my personal hope and goal in that is, frankly, we learn a lot about environmentally how things are done and can be much more efficient in the use of the Earth's resources, because I think that there's really that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then the secondary question really is going to be, hey, how do we support that energy wise? Because the consumption of power right now on it is going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for the next 10 years in supporting AI, which sounds funny because, we talk about the business and the money and the economics, and there's a lot of money going into it. But as organizations like Google are restarting nuclear power in 3 Mile Island, what used to be too expensive from a power standpoint is now going, hey, we need more power and we're willing to invest the money in it. So it'll be fascinating to see, frankly, can AI help us develop what we need in order to support AI fast enough? Or do we slow down because we just don't have the raw materials yet to support it at the level that it should be supported?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Jensen said that as on his keynote. He said we're rapidly getting to the point where power is going to be the limiting factor, not the technology. And then you've got the natural resources of how are you going to get that power, guys? Where are you going to get it from? So that's really interesting. And so you're seeing a sort of 10-year. You guys are looking out as a 10-year horizon, and I must say, and we're doing I'll mention it now so I don't forget. We are going to do a review of breaking down Jensen's keynote from GTC last week. We're going to get that bagged as a recording tomorrow, because there's a whole bunch of stuff he was saying that was completely over my head. But what's been really good, I think, and I hope everybody who's listening is also now picking up on this, is the technology is one thing, actually executing it in your enterprise, bagging some productivity gains, bagging some additional business outcome that you've monetized. That's what now needs to happen. And if I was a CFO, I'd be saying, look, guys, just show me some productivity gains. Shall we start there? And then with this AI thing that I'm now investing in, shall we start with some productivity gains, please, and some monetizable business outcomes? That's what I think needs to happen.
It's your classic crawl, walk, run in my mind. Prove something, then make it broader, and then go big. I think, there is this mindset right now of people wanting to go big because they think that, AI is transforming the way we do business. There's absolutely no question in my mind. 5 years from now, businesses will be run differently. There will be winners and losers. There will be jobs that are destroyed, and there will be jobs that are created. But I think people who are going big now, we don't know enough. We don't know all the components that should go in. We don't know, think about 3 years ago, ChatGPT didn't really exist. And it's transformational. And now you have DeepSeek, and you have Grok, and you have all these models, Llama 3, that are competing with it. First of all, that'll drive costs down. Second of all, you'll learn where things break, where they don't. Even within Cinchy, we learned we were applying our data network to some big AI models, and we found that there were laws of physics challenges, as I call them, which is you just can't get around them. Some of them is the speed that you can feed data in. Some of it is the number of tokens required and the costs associated with it. So if you start big, you run the risk of big failures. And, I still love an agile environment. So how do you get something done very quickly and then iterate? It will get big fast if it's successful. And you'll, without taking, millions of dollars of risk or tens of millions of dollars of risk, you can make significant incremental progress and have it have a boom effect, but don't do it all in one big bang. Like we used to do software development in waterfall. You'd get at the end of a year development cycle and then something would break, then it was the end of the world. Don't do that. Iterate so that you can see progress along the way.
Yeah, I really like that. Setting up that as almost like it is like a factory kind of. It's like we start here, we bag some productivity gains, we give we bag a business outcome here, then we move on. Then we, as you say, an iterative process. That's really interesting, Paul. Look, lots and lots of really good insight in that conversation. So I'm really glad we actually got this episode bagged. It's absolutely fascinating to talk to you. And now I'm going to ask you the question I'm going to ask of all the leaders coming onto this podcast. What's the one most ridiculous allegedly sales truth that you find the most ridiculous in the real world?
I would say that, qualification criteria is everything and it's a numbers game. The reality is, in my mind, it's not a numbers game. You can skew the numbers your direction by being really good at what you do. And secondarily to that, I would say, that there's a lot of myths around salespeople being, charismatic dumb jocks. The best salespeople that I've seen are incredibly curious human beings, and they have a broad swath of knowledge across a broad swath of things. Because I find when I'm selling, the best asset I have is connection with the person on the other side. And if they want to talk Roman history, I want to be able to talk enough Roman history that we can have that engagement. If they want to talk, Vikings football, I can talk a little Vikings football. And so, but at the end of the day, you're curious about the customer's business and what's important to them. And I think that people think it's more, I take people out to steak dinners and have great bottles of wine, which is part of it. But the reality is great salespeople are driven by their curiosity. And then the numbers game doesn't matter, because if I found qualified opportunities and connected with the people, I'm not winning 33% of the time. I'm winning 80% of the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Look, really wise words there. So thanks, Paul. Where do people follow you, find you, connect with you?
So LinkedIn's probably the best way. And as I said earlier in the podcast, be specific, don't be generic. I do reject a lot of people coming on LinkedIn because I know I'm getting the sales pitch next. Don't do that. Like, connect. If you want to connect with me, be specific on what you want to connect about. That's probably the best place to get me. And I'm just Paul Patterson on there. And, I encourage people to take a look at Cinchy if they're looking at big AI initiatives. And I'm always hiring great salespeople. So if there are salespeople that are looking and, feel compelled that the data is going to be the driver behind AI, I always love to hear from folks on that front too.
Yeah, fantastic, Paul. What we'll do, we'll include your LinkedIn profile link in the show notes. So, Paul, thank you. Let's wrap there. Thank you again for joining on a Sunday.
No worries.
Fascinating conversation as ever. And I look forward to seeing you soon. And maybe we'll have a steak and a nice bottle of wine. How about that?
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Paul.
Ben. All right, take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.